The purpose of this brief mini presentation is to give you some guidance in terms of completing the personal leadership and development and care plan that's embedded in week 7 of the Life of the Ministry Leader course. And when you approach this plan, what I'd like you to do is think of it basically as a strategic plan. Now I realize that maybe you haven't written a strategic plan throughout this program, and you may have some questions about how to do that. If you look at your guidelines in the syllabus and in the Blackboard course, you'll see that there are 3 key parts of this assignment. I'm going to walk you through what it would look like, especially as you move towards part 3, which really I would like to show you how to craft these statements so that it mirrors somewhat of a personal strategic plan for your own life. Now, this won't be comprehensive, and I know you're developing it, within a week and what you've reflected on in this last, 7 weeks in this course. But I hope that it'll be a space for you to kind of pull together some things that you've been thinking about to provide you some direction as you move on and graduate from this program. And so, first of all, when you think about writing a strategic plan, generally a strategic plan will have some kind of introduction, and that's usually the space where you introduce the plan and you articulate some of the foundational components of the plan, like the mission. If it's an organization, let's say, the mission of the organization, the vision of the organization, the values of the organization. But you could apply that same principle to your own life. So if this is your personal strategic plan, we want to articulate those things up front. And you're being asked to do that in part 1 of your paper. Secondly, usually a strategic plan will provide some background on the strategic plan itself. And that's usually the space to discuss how the strategic plan was developed. And usually it actually includes some kind of statement of limitations. And even though this connection might be kind of weak, part 2 of your paper, as described in the grading rubric and in your instructions there, is really to kind of lay a philosophical foundation for what you're going to discuss in part 3 of the course. So even though it's kind of a loose adaptation of the background section of a strategic plan, you can almost think of your lifelong leadership plan as having that component built in there. So you're introducing the plan, who you are, your mission and your values. You're providing some kind of background or some kind of philosophical rationale for why you have developed a plan the way you're going to do it in the following pages. Usually you'll even include a kind of technical paragraph. You don't have to do this for your plan paper, but how did you actually go about crafting the plan? Did you have a committee do it? Did you involve other stakeholders through surveys or what? How did you come about doing that? Then here's the really critical part of your strategic plan, what I want to spend some time addressing, and that is the idea of getting to the strategic initiatives that you're going to focus on, and then writing goals and objectives to help you achieve those initiatives. And this is really part 3 of the paper as defined in the grading rubric and in your course. And basically what a strategic initiative is in a paper like this, you write a strategic plan, you come up with maybe 3 to 5 broad areas, 3 to 5 broad strategic initiatives that your plan is hoping to address. And it's important to note that the strategic initiative area is usually more descriptive than it is prescriptive. So we're not getting into the details yet. We're just trying to describe what is it that in this plan I'm seeing as a priority for me to pursue in my own life. And so one area, for example, could be personal spiritual formation. I realize that for the future of my ministry, a strategic priority for me is to focus on my personal spiritual formation. Now, what you do in the next 2 steps, you move down to goals and objectives, and you start to flesh that out a little bit. So, what you want to do is then identify 3 to 5 goals, which will provide direction to how you're actually going to pursue that strategic initiative, how you're going to pursue personal spiritual formation. And so, for example, you might write a goal like this: to understand and practice the spiritual disciplines. And so you can say, well, to some degree, I already have that goal or I've achieved that goal, but you want to have articulate something that can push you beyond. So maybe you want to say, grow in my understanding of and practice of the spiritual disciplines, or something like that. But your goal is now taking the initiative, moving it more in the direction of operationalizing it, and then finally what you want to do is get it down to an objective level which is very concrete, it's measurable, and it tells you then how you're actually going to pursue that goal. You should be able to look back and say, oh, I did that, met the objective, so that, hopefully I made progress towards the goal. Now, just because you do all the objectives doesn't necessarily mean you meet the goal, but they're supposed to be measurable and help you actually get there. So, for example, if your strategic initiative is personal spiritual formation, your goal is to understand and practice the spiritual disciplines. One of your objectives might be then that I will read a book on the spiritual disciplines by July of 2015. And so you can almost see yourself mapping this out on a calendar or on a chart so that then you can see all these objectives lined up there for what you're going to pursue, what you're going to hope to pursue. Now, I would make this comment, the more discrete your objectives get and the more specific they are, and the farther out they get. So if you say to have a spiritual retreat by July of 2018, then the farther out it gets, the less likely it is you're actually going to complete that, because things are going to come up, life's going to change, your objectives, your goal is going to change, you're going to modify your objectives. The closer they are to the current time, the greater likelihood that you're actually going to fill those out. So when you write this, don't look at it as like a binding contract or something like that. It's more of less you expressing an intention and a direction for how you're strategically trying to plan for your own personal development and formation. So I wanted to make these comments then about the objective statements. This is really critical when you're writing objective statements. They should be clearly stated and they should be measurable. So what you need to ask yourself is, how will you know when you've achieved the goal, right? So if my objective was to read a book on the spiritual disciplines by July of 2015, well, I'll know if I did it because I have a date set and I had a very specific item that I'm going to read a book. Now, if I wanted to be even more specific, I could list which book I was going to read. But in either case, you can actually tell if you reached your goal or not. Secondly, objective statements should address one primary idea per statement, right? So you can't encapsulate everything in this. You can only address one thing. I'm going to read a book, and I'm going to do it by this date. That's my objective statement. And then thirdly, you can identify a number of different objective statements per goal area. So you can continue to break that down. You could have 3 to 5. You could have more objectives if you want to. But we want to try to keep, I'm recommending no more than 3 to 5 per area, because otherwise this will get a bit unwieldy and too long. So when you think about part 3B of your paper, this is what I would recommend. That you identify your 3 to 5 strategic initiative areas. Let's say one is professional growth. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write an introductory paragraph, and I want you to write it in paragraph form in which you describe and discuss that initiative. What I also want you to do is make a clear link between how that strategic initiative and how practicing and pursuing that strategic initiative will help you cultivate a love for God and cultivate Christ-like character in your own life. So I want you to be really explicit about that, write that in paragraph form. And then underneath of that initiative, you should list some goals, then with correlating objectives underneath of them. And you're going to follow, just like in outlining, a kind of parallel structure here. If you have a strategic initiative, you have to have a second one. If you have a goal, you have to have at least one more goal. If you have an objective, you have to have a second objective. And then, of course, you can have more, 3, 4, 5, but you always have to have a second one. And so that's what I would like you to do here. Again, looking at 3 to 5 strategic initiative areas, 3 to 5 goals per strategic initiative area, and then maybe 2 to 5, let's say, objectives per area. And just kind of dream and think out and plan out a little bit over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. What are the things that you're going to try to pursue? What are the things that you think God might be challenging you to try to pursue in this plan? Again, it's not a binding contract. I hope you'll find this exercise to be helpful in terms of summarizing what you've been processing in this course and the steps that you need to make to move ahead. And I hope it will be kind of liberating that way, that you'll be able to invite God into it and understand that you are not finished, right? You're done with this program, but you are not finished preparing yourself as a ministry leader. And I hope this plan can help you really internalize that concept. Thank you.